Things that are done to you or for you are never as effective as things you do for yourself. Which is kind of what I hate about the functional fitness type of work, is that it's not measurable or progressible. I said to John Jones when I was helping him in his camp, I said, we're not digging ditches, we're building mountains.
Big fat guy does a lift, and I think a lot of people are just all thinking the same thing. Like, oh, well, of course he can lift that. He weighs about that much.
I heard Mikhail Koklyaev only lifted 90% of his 1 rep max twice a year, and then only went for a max twice a year.
How does one know I'm holding too much weight? Because you mentioned like you're 220, but you might even be trying to get down to 210.
I wouldn't take anything out of my diet and replace it with acetyl. This is what the guru diet does. The guru diet takes the egg yolk out and puts peanut butter in. That's going backwards.
How much did you weigh here, Stan?
274.
Jesus.
I was in decent condition for that weight.
Still single digit body fat.
Yeah. Jesus.
Still had some abs on me.
I don't look anything like you in this.
Whoa. Oh, pause the video.
That double chin, triple chin.
Oh my God.
Yo.
You got to zoom in on the chin.
That is amazing.
The chins.
It's a completely different person.
Traps on traps over there too.
That was awesome. Truth be told, I rarely had to drop weight. It was hard for me to get up to 275. I had to force feed myself. And so I probably ate breakfast that morning too. I didn't have to do, I did a couple of small water cuts when I had gotten into the mid 280s, but no, this was fun. This was the Johnny Jackson thing. That was hilarious. Well before your time, I would say you were ahead of the times. Shooting videos like this was super unique at the time.
Mm-hmm.
To have these little call out videos, and this is one of the best.
You know, I think something that's unique about you, and I don't think we've talked about it that much before on the podcast. We have talked a bunch about you breaking records and all that kind of stuff, but you know, your records were, you broke all-time world records at around 40, maybe 42 years old or so.
Yeah, 44, I think, is when I set the 2303.
Wow.
It's 44 years old.
And your powerlifting, I know you had some basis in powerlifting. I know that you lifted for strength when you were younger and stuff, but your second powerlifting career, you didn't really have a surgence in powerlifting until you were 40.
Correct.
And then you ended up breaking the all-time world record around 44 years of age, which is amazing.
And it was in the infancy of YouTube. You were absolutely a pioneer in this. And what's interesting is when I look at some of our videos from 12, 14 years ago, as opposed to some of the podcasts that we've done just in the last few years. 12, 14 years ago, the videos were 500,000, 600,000, 800,000 views. And you look at the more recent ones, it's 40, 50. There's just so much content now.
Right? Yeah.
You kind of think about, when we talk about programs that we used to grow up on, well, I used to at my age, things like the show Dallas,
And you're 56?
I'm 57 now.
Walker, Texas Ranger.
Shows that were on when we only had 2 or 3 channels. And when I was a kid growing up, you had 2 channels, and if you moved the bunny ears around a little bit and held on to them, you could get a 3rd channel.
No remote control.
No remote control, back and forth the TV. But those shows, MASH, shows that like 100 million Americans would watch, like half the population would watch. Yeah. So there was, people had that same common topic to discuss. Now you've got hundreds of channels, and even the most popular shows don't get 10% the viewership of what these older shows got. And I guess my point is that as a pioneer in the industry, as you were when you started YouTube, there was less of this going on. So we enjoyed, I've enjoyed, much to your efforts, an extraordinary amount of publicity from doing things that are much more common today. And there's people who have certainly outperformed. I was just looking, who was the gentleman, Colton, who just had that 26-25 total or what have you.
26-45 total, I think.
I mean, the kid's completely in another world. And I follow him, and I looked on his Instagram site, and I think he's got 40,000 followers.
Yeah.
I'm like, this kid's the best power lifter of all time, potentially, right? Yeah. He's certainly the world record holder of all time. And it's hard. Yeah, here it is.
When somebody,
or is this a different one?
When somebody lifts,
this is him
like
here.
he did 1,036
look at this
squat.
Absolutely perfect. Look at the depth. Boom.
Oh, just hammered it.
Hammered it. Yeah. And his bench too was the same way. This was a perfect bench. He didn't have any.
It looks pretty easy.
He could have gotten another 20 pounds, I think. Here
he did 1,036 squat
nice
and
long
deadlift,
pause, solid lift,
and a 573.
The
bench.
deadlift is a beautiful lockout and hold. You know, he didn't just let go of it right away.
But does this count?
Does this sumo?
Look, he just holds that, sets it down.
I'm joking.
The
I'm
bar,
joking.
bar looks rather bendy. I don't
We
know.
always say this.
I love
because
sumo.
When you watch lifts on the video, they always look really fast. Of course, when you feel them, they're slow and heavy. But you know, he had more in the tank on all of those. But here you got a 24-year-old kid who's all-time world record holder, who just hasn't experienced the same level of I don't know what you'd say, popularity or what yet. Which he certainly deserves it and will. Larry Wheels was able to capitalize, and he's got a huge following. But I guess it's also because we had the benefit of, the bodybuilding, powerlifting, world's strongest bodybuilder, whatever that is. And Larry was also multiple things. He had that. We talked earlier about the fact that he had the arm wrestling thing, which was hugely popular.
Mm-hmm. I think he got a lot of young people into arm wrestling too, because I see a lot of younger people, and it's like they probably saw it from Larry first.
Yeah, and he had a bodybuilder's physique and a powerlifter's, world record holding powerlifter's, accomplishments, and then he had the strongman stuff. So he's been really interesting to watch. He's got a lot of different talents. So
big fat guy does a lift, and I think a lot of people are just all thinking the same thing. Like, oh well, of course he can lift that. He weighs about that much.
Eric Spoto used to just hate that when he would get in and do a 700-pound bench press, and people would like, oh, single body weight bench press, because he had a belly. Just doing things that are the freakiest thing you've ever seen.
But he was not fat. He was just huge.
He was huge, yeah. But he had a little belly, and he hated some of his videos being posted when those were the comments that people would give. It's crazy.
That was definitely the most unique world record holder I've ever met. He was way different than everybody else.
He really was. Yeah, there's some people that are just born freaks. Larry's certainly one, and this is a great example here. I mean, that's Devin Lorette, and one of the greatest arm wrestlers of all time. And even Devin and arm wrestling in general was taken to a whole nother level when it was exposed to a whole nother audience through Larry Wheels. Mm-hmm. As our bodybuilding, powerlifting marriage that we were able to benefit from through all the years that I worked with you.
And you also got your pro card in bodybuilding in your 40s. So I just think it'd be cool if you can kind of, like, how did you break world records in your 40s? How did you get your pro card in your 40s? Because I think there's a lot of people that as they age, even some people that are just in their like low 30s that have been lifting for a long time. They're like, man, my elbows are fried. My knees are fried. Yeah. How were you able to keep your body together, and how were you able to, follow through on some of those things?
My elbows and knees were fried in the mid 90s. I stopped competing in 1997, and my body was a wreck. And I took 10 years off of competing. I spent that time trying to develop some businesses and build a career. And
you're still active though, right? Like physically?
I still trained. There was a couple times there where I didn't go to a gym for about a year, where things were so busy and I was burning the candle on both ends, and my businesses were kind of all my focus. But I still trained. And then in 2006, I started training. 2004, 5, and 6, started training a little more, and then competed again in 2006. I had all that time off, and so my body was still in decent shape. I'd recovered from a lot of the damage that I'd done to myself, and then I didn't compete again until 2008. 2 years went by in terms of competition. I've said this before, and I'll always look back on this mostly in kind of assessing why. In retrospect, I'm always trying to look back to see what reasons why things worked for me, and some of it has to do with the same way that Eddie Cohn trained throughout his career. He would compete in powerlifting twice a year, and then he would bodybuild in between those times. And so he would do less weight, more volume and frequency. And he also stayed pretty close to competition weight. Eddie never got really, really heavy in the off season. So most of the damage that you would do, say with metabolic syndrome, to your body, is from the extra weight, just being heavy. The blood pressure elevations, the blood sugar elevations, the NAFLD, all those things that the lipids, the dyslipidemia and elevated LDL, all that occurs with body weight. The sleep apnea, all those things. So, but I was periodizing that. Of course, I would bulk up to powerlift and I would diet down to bodybuild. And I think that made a huge impact on my longevity, is that I wouldn't stay heavy year round. And so, and the training wasn't as heavy. By then I had learned what I hadn't learned back in the 90s, is that I didn't have to do singles. I didn't have to work up to a 1 rep max every single week like I used to do. And so bodybuilding was more repetitions, more volume. So and the bodybuilding volume that I would do back then, I think also helped with my conditioning. And so I think I stayed pretty reasonably healthy. I would get the blood tests and I would be able to monitor that. I think that was the biggest reason I was able to maintain longevity, is I didn't just stay heavy all the time and just keep pounding heavy weights. And that's what I advise my clients now. Periodize their weight. Off-the-war, we brought them down from 440 pounds to into the 390s, just to resolve some of the fatty liver, high blood pressure, and those things, and just the joint strain of being that heavy and lifting those loads. And that I think that lengthens their career. Look how far back to powerlifting again. And that's one of the first things Mitchell Hooper said. It's like, I want to get bigger, but I don't want to get unhealthy or fatter. And so, we implemented a program that would allow him to do that, so he can have some longevity, because he's already thinking beyond strongman. He's got, he can do just about anything with his level of talent.
Do you think that, like, being able to, all the volume you learned how to handle while doing bodybuilding, do you think that kind of helped you when you went into powerlifting in terms of being able to handle the fatigue of high intensity work, or not really?
Yeah, maybe the conditioning, but then some literature came out recently that suggests your cardiovascular conditioning probably doesn't have a lot to do with DOMS restoration and recovering from workouts. I was, kind of hard to read that stuff when you've leaned into having a bigger gas tank, maybe helping with recovery. A lot of the stuff, and I shot a video, the best way to recover from workouts many years ago, and I said things that are done to you or for you are never as effective as things you do for yourself. And I talked about the fact that passive therapies, things like chiropractor, electric stem, icing, gua sha, you name it. There's a whole list of different things that stretching, that people attempt to use to decrease DOMs and to help recover from workouts. And I said that just movement in general, just staying active. At the time I talked about the fact that in Sacramento, I'd put a little recumbent bike in my bedroom because I used to just lay in bed after our workouts for 3 days and just be sore. And then when I started implementing the 3 bikes a day, 3 10-minute bikes a day after each meal, I would recover much quicker from the workouts. And so that was active versus passive as an example of that. Things that are done to you or for you, not as effective as things you do for yourself, the active workouts. And now there's been a big shift in the industry. Most of the folks that are I think the most knowledgeable in terms of pain prevention, or pain or injury prevention and rehabilitation, suggests the vast majority of focus, which is why we spent so much time this morning talking about load management and fatigue, should be, an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure, should be before the damage is done. And we understand now that doing the damage isn't the driver of the results, so let's try and mitigate some of the damage. So now we're looking at load management. And that's why my volume has reduced, and that's why I've taken fewer sets to failure. There's a host of things that you can do on the front end to not, I said to John Jones when I was helping him in his camp, I said, we're not digging ditches, we're building mountains. And so be really careful how deep of a hole you dig in your training, because about all you're doing is maybe repairing what you broke down, but you're not super compensating and progressing over time. And you may work very hard and get very sore and then do it again, but did you get better? Has the adaptation occurred? Has the stimulus been sufficient for an adaptation? And did you not work so hard that all you're doing is fixing what you broke and then not actually realizing that super compensation to be able to progress? You should be getting faster, jump higher, lift more, all those things as it relates to sports. And that's why we're so fixated now on actually measuring, which is kind of what I hate about the functional fitness type of work, is that it's not measurable or progressible. And I want to make sure that if an athlete is intending, to get better at their sport, that there are certain metrics we can measure. Could be a high jump, could be a broad jump, it could be any of the lifts in the gym under the same conditions with the same load. And then that, because it's so hard to measure performance in a dynamic sport like fighting or football, because there's so many other variables that are associated with that. So without getting too far off onto another topic, really load management is where everybody should be putting most of their planning to make sure that they're not overreaching. Be patient. Mikhail Koklyaev talked about that. I had the good fortune to train with him and attend a seminar. It was just here in Oakland, I believe, with Jesse years and years ago. And he said, you Americans, it's always you Americans. You guys you're impatient. You have a 3-month plan, the next meet, right? They have 4 and 5 year plans. And I can remember when Mikhail Koklyaev lifted at the animal cage at the Arnold. And we know from looking at videos of Mikhail, he can deadlift 400 kilos, 881 pounds for a triple. He's that freaking strong. He gets to the Arnold, he gets to the animal cage, where of course everybody tries to do, their biggest lift ever in their life. Mm-hmm. He deadlifted 765 quite easily and thanked the audience because that was where he was at in his prep for his next competition. He was trying to show off to an audience in Columbus, Ohio. He was trying to prepare for a national qualifier or nationals. And so he only lifted 90% of his 1-rep max twice a year. And those were the qualifiers for nationals and worlds. And then only went for a max twice a year. And that was at nationals and worlds.
One of the strongest athletes of all time, by the way.
Indeed.
People should know who this guy is. Amazing weightlifter, amazing strongman athlete, and an amazing powerlifter. And I think for a while he had the all-time record in a deadlift for a Russian athlete, I think, at some point. So he's just completely ridiculous.
Yeah, you talk about a guy like Mikhail and then his knowledge and all he put in. You think about Eddie Cohn, a true student of the sport, somebody who spent the time and energy trying to master the sport.
Can you, with that deadlift though, real quick, what I find super interesting was his foot positioning on it. How beautifully stacked he was. He's
bow-legged as hell when you watch him walk. It looks like he's been riding a horse all his life, and so he does have you're right.
He shoves his knees outward,
kind of push out, but that's also his.
And he lifts it like he's going to Olympic lift it.
Yeah, exactly.
His setup. Now, a lot of people watch that video and they think, well, Mikhail goes from a low position. That's his setup. But if you look at the point at which those plates leave the mat, he's at 70% angle. Mm-hmm. And his ass is high. And that's every deadlift starts when the plates leave the ground. You don't have an exaggerated knee angle. He's not at 90. He's at you look there's so as soon as the plates leave the ground, look at his hip angle. Yep. And his knee angle.
This guy's really one of a kind because like at the seminar that he did with Jesse, I don't know if you remember him playing the guitar afterwards.
Yeah.
He's playing the guitar and he's singing. Him and his coach, they're singing and like it was just amazing. I was like, this guy's got so much charisma. It's unbelievable.
Yes, and they're
funny.
He's hilarious. They're superstitious as well. I stepped over the deadlift bar.
Oh yeah, they don't like that.
He was like, oh, like this big deal. That's not good. You don't step over the deadlift bar. You walk around it. Yeah, and then he said, Stan, he said, I watch you lift many times. He goes, and every time I watch you lift, I want to fix your fucking form. And I said, Mikhail, I'm a strong bodybuilder. I said, I don't do powerlifting. It's not my sport.
See if we can actually hear some of this, Ryan. This is amazing. He's so happy.
Yeah. Much better powerlifter than a singer, of course. Sounds like
He's having so much fun, though. That's what I loved about it. I was like, this guy's incredible.
Sounds like a wounded moose. Beautiful thing.
So like, when we were powerlifting, I remember, you started doing a lot of blood work. I don't know if you did a lot of blood work before that time.
Periodically, yeah, before that time. But around the time I was powerlifting from 2008 through all the years that we trained together, I'd gotten kind of addicted to seeing the results and trying to influence the outcomes. And so I would implement some sort of protocol and then test again to see if it was working. But I almost on a monthly basis, sometimes 60 days out, 30 days out, the day after, and then 30 days after a meet, really just to see what was happening with both bodybuilding and powerlifting, because different things would happen. If you're powerlifting, you're going to see different things on your blood test than if you're bodybuilding.
As it relates to strength, did you notice anything with like free testosterone or testosterone to like steroidal ratios?
Not a lot.
Or
One thing I noticed was estrogen. It seems that the stronger I was when my estrogen was higher and my estrogen was lower. And in the bodybuilding world, we used to suppress estrogen with estrogen
Explains
blockers.
why my face is so fat.
Yeah. And the estrogen blockers we discovered over the years would make you weaker, and so that was one thing. The other rest of it was all health issues: liver markers, kidney markers, creatinine, AST, ALT, lipids, blood pressure, blood sugar, all of those things. You want to see just how terrible you were doing. Most of that was impacted by fat gain, but there was also the orals would affect the liver to a more significant degree. And at one time I'd introduced, now I forget the name of the oral. It was the one that was legal. It was sold at GNC for the longest time.
Oh, like Androstene or something?
Yeah. What was it? The audience will remember. It's been so long since I've been involved in all that stuff.
There's Androstene Dione. There's, I don't know what's like legal. I don't know legal stuff.
Yeah, it was. Well, then they found out it was actually just a designer steroid. It was causing a lot of liver issues. But I had taken some before the world's strongest pro bodybuilder. It's the first time I'd used it. And the test that I got done, I felt super tired all the time. And of course, that's a pretty good indicator. And when your appetite goes away and you're exhausted, it's a pretty good indicator that something toxic's going on with your liver. And my liver enzymes after that were like 6 times normal. It was outrageous. I think hepatitis is 10 times normal, so that's where you're headed. It's pretty common under testosterone therapy to get up to 1.5 to 2 times normal, and that might not be a huge issue. Obviously, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but it seems to be somewhat normal at about 1.5 and don't necessarily see liver problems. But when you get up to 4, 5, 6 times normal with your liver enzymes, it's probably a good idea to do something different.
And when you would see these results, like I'd imagine you're maybe still prepping for a contest or something like that. And do you kind of ignore it and say, well, I only got 4 more weeks left?
And that's the thing. I've said that, health and fitness, if you want to be healthy, don't compete. Right.
Right.
And health and fitness aren't the same thing. And the fitness level required to compete usually comes either, now we're talking about with your blood work, but what about people who have suffered dynamic injuries? I talked about 14-year-olds and the girls in the Olympics, blowing out collateral or blowing out, getting carpal tunnel syndrome or Achilles tendons blown out, and 10-year-olds competing in badminton in China, blowing out collateral ligaments, and football players, all those dynamic injuries. And so there's a point at which when you're competing that it's just not healthy. And so, yeah, you make some exceptions and you say, well, this is for a short period of time. Bikini girls competing on stage in a bikini show the last 30 days, suffering from amenorrhea, the female triad, from cessation of the menstrual period and from anemia potentially and hypothyroidism, and very common. And they might take supplements to try and avoid some of that, prescriptions as well. So yeah, there are things, sacrifices you make and potentially interventions that you employ to combat some of that, while you're competing. But then it also is a good measure. It's why I love blood testing, because it tells you where you're at. And so right after the competition, at least you've got some measure of things you need to fix.
And an interesting thing, honestly, about what you're saying, even on the natural side of natural bodybuilding, the men, when you get that lean, your test is in the tank. Like you have nothing. Your sex drive is gone. Yeah. You know what I mean? So
just from lack of sleep and overtraining. Very common. The intensity of the training drives testosterone down. Doesn't seem to impact performance, though, at the Olympics. We see testosterone within the normal range. That range doesn't seem to.
Their body fat is still at a place where they can perform. But with bodybuilding, your body fat is getting. You're so lean that it's just like it's not. You wouldn't be doing any type of actual sport being that lean.
No.
Yeah. So
not good.
Did you feel like death when you were competing, when you got on stage?
100%. Both powerlifting and bodybuilding. Yeah.
Powerlifting too.
Yeah, that was the worst part about it, was just the way you feel that last few weeks to a month. Bodybuilding, like you say, you just get super, super weak, extremely hungry. And then with powerlifting, of course, you're very tired, particularly with performance-enhancing drugs and particularly orals and their impact on the liver. You just are exhausted constantly. What's interesting is that you go into the gym and you start touching weight, and it's like a light switch flicks on, and it's just euphoric. Everything feels light, and you're just crushing weights. And
but outside of that, you feel like
crap. For 1 hour, you just feel like amazing. And then you go sit down and eat lunch somewhere, and 20, 30 minutes later, you just like this wave hits you, and you're just
really
exhausted. Yeah.
Did you feel like that too?
Oh yeah. You definitely
yeah. Let's get you about 60 pounds overweight and a bunch of D-ball, and we'll see. And Trust me, you'll feel like
if
shit.
you think about it, if someone was to gain, let's just say somebody gained 8 or 10 pounds, even in the course of like 3 months, just going to feel worse.
Well, just
because it's fast, right? So if you, and that's what would happen a lot of times. A lot of times after competition, you would like downsize, you would lose a little bit of weight, you lose some water. You wouldn't utilize the oral steroids because they're damaging to your liver. So you would discontinue those. Yeah. And you would probably take less stuff because there's no reason to be blasting that much stuff when a competition isn't coming around. Yeah. So when a competition starts to come around, you take a little bit more and then you add in the orals. And that amount of weight and stuff like that, just the blood pressure and just all the different things that you feel, just kind of make you kind of feel lethargic and make you feel like shit kind of.
It's important to mention too, when we talked about the doses that would utilize for competition, that would just be for that window that you would raise the doses up that high for whatever it was, usually about 8 to 10. I generally didn't train for a powerlifting meet longer than 12 weeks. So by then I would be overreaching and get weaker is what I found. And so usually around 8 to 10 weeks as you prep for the show, I'm at my highest dose. And then immediately after the show, you can go down to something. So that's another reason why you're able to maintain your health if you don't try and maintain those doses year round.
I will never go to a doctor ever again about my general health. All they want to do is put you on pills.
Really well said there by Dana White. Couldn't agree with him more. A lot of us are just trying to get jacked and tan. A lot of us just want to look good, feel good. And a lot of the symptoms that we might acquire as we get older, some of the things that we might have, high cholesterol or these various things, it's amazing to have somebody looking at your blood work as you're going through the process, as you're trying to become a better athlete, somebody that knows what they're doing. They can look at your cholesterol. They can look at the various markers that you have, and they can kind of see where you're at, and they can help guide you through that.
And there's a few aspects too, where it's like, yes, I mean, no shade to doctors, but a lot of times they do want to just stick you on medication. A lot of times there is supplementation that can help with this. At Merrick Health, these patient care coordinators are going to also look at the way you're living your lifestyle, because there's a lot of things you might be doing that if you just adjust that, boom, you could be at the right levels, including working with your testosterone.
And there's so many people that I know that are looking for, they're like, hey, should I do that? They're very curious. And they think that testosterone is going to all of a sudden kind of turn them into the Hulk. But that's not really what happens. It can be something that can be really great for your health, because you can just basically live your life a little stronger, just like you were maybe in your 20s and 30s.
And this is the last thing to keep in mind, guys. When you get your blood work done at a hospital, they're just looking at like these minimum levels. At Merrick Health, they try to bring you up to ideal levels for everything you're working with. Whereas if you go into a hospital and you have 300 nanograms per deciliter of test, you're good, bro, even though you're probably feeling like shit. At Merrick Health, they're going to try to figure out what things you can do in terms of your lifestyle. And if you're a candidate, potentially TRT. So these are things to pay attention to get you to your best self.
And what I love about it is a little bit of the back and forth that you get with the patient care coordinator. They're dissecting your blood work. It's not like you just get this email back and it's just like, hey, try these 5 things. Somebody's actually on the phone with you, going over every step and what you should do. Sometimes it's supplementation, sometimes it's TRT, and sometimes it's simply just some lifestyle habit changes.
All right, guys, if you want to get your blood work checked and also get professional help from people who are going to be able to get you towards your best levels, head to merrickhealth.com and use code POWERPROJECT for 10% off any panel of your choice.
Within the last 5 years or so, you've downsized considerably. You're around 220 pounds now.
Yeah, 57 now. I'd always promised myself I'd weigh less sooner, but you just get. You identify yourself as a certain type of size or weight, and I represent myself in the industry as a world's strongest bodybuilder, former powerlifter guy, and then people look at you and they're like, "You were strong." So I
don't think anyone's looking at you right now asking that question, dude.
I've always thought that especially strong men and powerlifters hold on to too much weight for too long and potentially, put themselves at risk. And we've seen, without mentioning names, lots of people that we know over the years end up in the hospital with kidney problems or with a cardiovascular event in their 50s or certainly by their 60s. And I didn't want to be that guy. So we've worked hard, you and I both over the last many years to get healthier. And now it seems like the last thing is really the body weight. That to a point, big dogs die sooner than small dogs. To a point, even if it's lean weight, because we've been lean since we were 240 and thereabouts, but now we've chosen to take another 20, 30 pounds off. And it helps
just for Stan, just to correct you, you've been lean the entire time, whether you were 270, 290 or otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, it's too much. Now, mind you, I never had, genetically, people are different in where they store fat. And some people store it subcutaneously in their, like women in particular, in their hips and butt. And that isn't necessarily very unhealthy fat. Now, those who store fat viscerally, ectopic fat around the organs, some of those folks, like me, you could see a six-pack when I was 280, but I had liver fat. I had NAFLD at that weight. Not a ton, but it wasn't ideal.
That's something you got tested for?
Yeah, you would see it. Sometimes you'd see it in your AST, ALT elevations, but I would also get scans to see,
like an MRI or something.
Heart scan to and a torso scan to see what was going on. Coronary angiography.
Yeah.
DEXA can help a little bit. There's some things you can do. I did coronary angiography and a scan of my torso, so I was able to see. It was kind of a hypochondriac there for a while, and I got to about every test. And if I'm going to recommend tests, I'd like to know what they say and what their efficacy is, and whether or not they are predictive of or can lead to good recommendations for resolution or something. So I've tried them all. I've had the CAC and I've had a host of different scans over the years, trying to see what kind of damage I'd done to myself, if not permanent or otherwise. So, I've kind of known all along. And on that same note, there's some populations, like in India, you'll see those folks that have like toe feet, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. Mm-hmm. They'll have these teeny little arms and teeny little legs, but they'll have this little pot belly. And I had a brother-in-law who passed away not too long ago in his 50s because he had NAFLD and pancreatic disease, and all he had was this little belly, but he was really light. He was, by the BMI standard, he would have been, he wouldn't have been considered obese or overweight. So it's different for different people where you store the fat. Women who go through menopause, it differentially affects where they store their fat, and they start to see it accumulate around the belly, and that it's hormonally driven. And so those are things to watch out for. Just because somebody has a six-pack, but I think Eddie Hall has suffered from the same problem. I think back when he was 400 pounds and drinking Kool-Aid every day, he has a six-pack on the outside, but underneath, I think he was suffering from some liver fat, obviously, and so he lost a ton of weight, to get healthier. And those are things to watch out for. You can't always tell by looking at someone, and NAFLD can be an insidious disease. So,
is there any way to target some of the visceral fat?
Weight
with
loss,
particular diets or anything, or
weight
exercise?
Loss. Yeah, it seems that weight loss is the primary driver or the primary solution, and just a 7% weight loss can result in, I think, a 95% resolution of reversal of NAFLD, as tested by biopsy, which is the most accurate test. So a 300-pound person losing 20 pounds, they could go a long way. You don't have to be skinny or thin or have a six-pack to get rid of NAFLD, but up to a 15% weight loss seems to demonstrate a reversal of type 2 diabetes for those people whose pancreas doesn't already have beta cell destruction, but they can actually get restoration of their beta cells. And we hate to say to use the word cure, because it's one of those diseases that so long as you manage your weight, it's fine. But if you were to gain weight back, it would relapse. Yeah. So about a 15% weight loss can, in most cases, can result in a reversal of type 2 diabetes and NAFLD.
This kind of makes me curious, and this is a question for both of you guys, because like PEDs can make you put on an amount of weight and muscle that like you wouldn't be able to put on otherwise, right? But then how does one know, like, I'm holding too much weight? How because when somebody gets to a point where maybe they should, but how do they know? Because you mentioned like you're 220, but you might even be trying to get down to 210. So in your mind, why are you making that decision? Because you're already 220 and you're healthier, right? Why would you get lighter?
As much as I hate to admit it, it's because I picked up this nasty little addiction about a year ago called pickleball.
Okay.
And I have not moved laterally since college.
Okay.
And for 6 or 9 months, because I was 235, 237 or so about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
it took me a long time to get over the pain that I was, my hips and my knees and my ankles and my feet. And so the more weight I took off, the easier it became. And so now I'm still trying to train hard, but generally speaking, I had a pickleball court set up in my driveway at my house in Vegas. And that house in Vegas was right on Sunset Park, which has 26 professional courts. And so I would go, it was right in my backyard.
Yeah.
And so I would just walk over there and play. And so that was a nasty little habit I picked up some time ago. And now I brought my paddle with me. And
you have it with you right now?
I brought it with me. I left American Samoa, which you fly to Honolulu, Hawaii. Yeah. And then I stopped in Vegas, where I went and I played pickleball. I left out the next morning. I went to Toronto, Canada to do a seminar. And I found a place to play pickleball there. And then I went to Iowa to visit my pops, and I spent there 3 days there. 2 of the nights I went and played pickleball. And then I went to Cincinnati, Ohio, to do a seminar with Matt Whittemer, and I played pickleball there. And then I went to Dallas and did a seminar or did an interview with Jordan Syatt, and I played pickleball there.
Yeah.
And then I flew out to Vegas and played pickleball in Vegas. And then I came up here, and guess what I did this morning? I woke up early and I went and I played pickleball over at the pickleball court right down the street.
Nice.
So it's a nasty little addiction. I use it as my exercise now. And I
think that's a great addiction to have. Great movement, man. I always
said the best exercise is the one you'll do. You would not catch me in a gym walking on a treadmill. It's just no way I'd do that consistently. And I've said for years now, I don't prescribe that to my clients. Take the 10-minute walks because they're convenient and you can adhere to them. And find some activity that you enjoy and do it repeatedly. I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter. I think we in the fitness field try and get, too specific and force people into things that they just don't enjoy or won't, do consistently.
Yeah.
When you were looking at your blood work, you were saying you were curious to see what kind of damage have you done? Have you done any, real damage, and have you suffered any permanent damage that you haven't been able to figure out?
That was an important point that Nsima had started into, how do you know? My obviously desire to lose more weight now is just because I play pickleball better. I can move faster. But as far as health marker goes, if and a lot of my clients who come to me, the first thing we do is check blood pressure and get a blood test. And the key things that we look for, obviously, is high blood pressure. That'll kill you now. And we want to get that down right away. And there's some, obviously, resolving sleep apnea, losing weight, increasing potassium. Taking tadalafil at 5 milligrams a day has a huge effect on vasodilation and blood pressure. Those are the big rocks there. Apnea, weight loss, probably the 2 biggest ones in terms of blood pressure. And if it can't be resolved, then now we've got blood pressure medications that have very little side effects and actually are cardioprotective. Telmisartan and Nebivolol actually decreases left ventricular hypertrophy and has some cardioprotective events or effects. So I'm not at all opposed to suggesting those people who can't get their blood pressure within a normal range don't utilize both lifestyle and potentially medical intervention for that. So that's the big one, blood pressure first and foremost. And then on the blood test, we're looking for, kidney and liver health would be a big one. AST, ALT, creatinine, BUN. High blood pressure is one of the biggest drivers of kidney health. And so that's preemptive in and of itself. But some people will get a blood test and see some elevated creatinine, and it's just because they're working out, and that'll put myoglobin into the bloodstream that's red to look like kidney. When you have kidney problems, it'll release into the bloodstream. That the test will pick up the creatine consumption or the muscle tissue breakdown if it's independent of the kidney's function. So there may be other testing you have to do. Cystatin C is a more specific test for kidneys. Obviously, liver health we look at. If they're on TRT, we're looking at increased hemoglobin and hematocrit potentially, but we don't want to overdonate and potentially give somebody anemia from depleting their iron. So we also want to check iron and ferritin storage and platelets to make sure that they don't have thick blood. Dyslipidemia, we want to look at high LDL, or currently the best we have is actually ApoB. That's kind of the the best marker, the most accurate for an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease that we discussed last time.
In the camp with like Peter Itea, trying to keep that ApoB low and so
100%. Yeah. And, Peter's evolved too. I mean, Peter used to be keto. He used to be intermittent fasting. He used to not worry too much about ApoB LDL. And now, he sees the literature that supports the fact that that's something that we should keep under control. And, lifestyle, there's very little you can do. We talked about it in our last interview, just reducing saturated fats and increasing soluble fibers and losing some body weight. If that doesn't fix the problem, then you may need medication. Unfortunately, 10 years ago, we had, I think, a bigger problem with high-dose statins causing myalgia, muscle pain and what have you. Now they use dual therapies with low-dose statins and some ezetimibe, which is not a statin, in very low doses, have very few side effects, but are extremely effective, and they're very affordable. There's more expensive medications. But again, like blood pressure, if that's something you can't get under control, it's something that you should pay attention to, and you may need some medical intervention. If you've got hypothyroidism, you probably need to be on thyroid medication. If you've got hypogonadism, you probably want to use testosterone replacement therapy, because we see that people with low testosterone, hypogonadal, have higher disease risk than those people that are that have normal testosterone. So the supplementation can put you in a better place. Same with menopausal women taking estrogen therapy. They have lower incidence of particularly breast cancer and other problems, plus side effects associated with the loss of estrogen, the hot flashes, etc. So women should be on some sort of therapy if they're menopausal or perimenopausal and have low hormones as a result. All those things come into play.
Quick question about the testosterone replacement therapy. Mm-hmm. Do you think, because some people get on it earlier for means for performance, but for someone who's like, their training is meant to keep them healthier, they're just trying to stay super healthy. When you mentioned postmenopausal women considering some testosterone, but for men, I know there's not necessarily an age, but are there things that you think, is there a time where they should maybe consider it? A time maybe where they should put it off or consider?
You can get a blood test and look at your levels and see if you're low. Mm-hmm. But it seems that people respond differently to different levels. Yeah. So now you've got, do you treat the symptoms or do you treat the number? And we tend to look more at symptoms now, although many of those symptoms, and I said this almost 10 years ago in that Iceland seminar, I said that if you've got low T, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to take testosterone right away. You need to look at maybe why. Maybe you're overweight and you're converting to estrogen. Maybe you're not getting adequate sleep, maybe which can reduce testosterone 30-40% in just one night with a short night of sleep. Maybe you're overtraining. Maybe you aren't training hard enough. There's a whole host of different things that might attribute that. Zinc, it might be a nutrient deficiency potentially. I'm not suggesting any of those things are performance enhancers if you would use a supplement. We don't know of any natural supplements, herbs, or whatever that makes a meaningful difference in testosterone increase in order to suggest that you should take some supplement. But, for the most part, you treat the symptoms. And so if an individual has a lot of the symptoms, which would be, potentially loss of energy, loss of libido, lean muscle mass loss, increased body fat, just body composition change, just general malaise or fatigue, which all of those things can be caused by a lot of things, as just mentioned, the sleep and et cetera. And then maybe you're a candidate for testosterone replacement therapy. One of the challenges is that a lot of folks will start testosterone replacement therapy and they'll also implement some changes in those other things. They'll improve their sleep, they'll improve their diet, they'll start exercising regularly, and they'll get all these, and they'll have this great first 30 or 60 days. And then they'll stop paying much attention to the lifestyle stuff, sleep, exercise, and eating. And then they won't continue to realize the benefits, and they'll think that testosterone's not working. And so they'll discontinue therapy. But things take more. Or they'll take more. And you also have to be careful. Things like ED are generally a canary in the coal mine for insulin resistance. So maybe these individuals are starting to have prediabetes or diabetes, which the blood test would show with glucose and HA1C, or more predictively triglycerides or fasted insulin would be the better predictor of your insulin resistance. So oftentimes they'll take testosterone, and that might just kick the can down the road. It might give you some of the benefits without actually resolving the insulin resistance. So the insulin resistance keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse until the testosterone that you're taking is no longer helping. And so you're better off looking, kind of getting in front of all those things as well.
Do you still wear a sleep apnea mask?
I do. And, I had hoped, I'd thought that part of losing weight, and I keep thinking there's a number on it, would help me to resolve sleep apnea. And I'm glad you brought it up because there's a number of different things here that I think are important for our audience. I always reference Jordan Fagenbaum. I think he hates it when I do it, but because he's 200 pounds and has a six-pack, but wears a CPAP because he's got a thick neck because he squats 650, 660 and deadlifts over 700. So, and he's a lot younger than me. I think he's only 40 now. So it's not necessarily weight related. That's the primary reason for cause and resolution is weight related, but just a crowding of the airway, or some people just have genetic predispositions for poor breathing and maybe some clogging in the nasals, the area and stuff like that, and your sinuses. So I had hoped that maybe that my apnea would improve, and I haven't done a subsequent study in a lab to see that, but I've tried a little bit. I'm not wearing it for a night and to see how I felt in the morning. But there are better ways to do that. And one of the most affordable ways, some people don't have insurance or a doctor, and a sleep study is $1,500. There are a couple things you can do. One of them is to get on the internet and look at the Stop Bang questionnaire. And that takes you through some pretty obvious things like, are you snoring and waking up tired? Does your significant other see any episodes where you're holding your breath at night, what have you? But there's another one that I think is kind of like the poor man's sleep study, and that's these pulse oximeters that you put on your finger, and they give you your pulse and they give you your oxygenation rate of your blood.
It's like $20 on Amazon.
Yeah, they have them now that hook up to an iPhone via Bluetooth and give you repeated readings throughout the evening. Oh. I think that one's on Amazon for like $39. Like you say, it's dirt cheap. And you just wear that, pair it to your iPhone, go to sleep. And when you wake up in the morning or whenever you wake up, you can check and see. It'll tell you, it gives you measurements, what your average, all those there, what your average blood oxygenation was. And if that gets down below 90, 88, certainly 85, you're holding your breath during the night. And so that would be a good way for you to give you an indicator of the fact that you might need to employ a CPAP. And there again, we have a cost. We have if you're not insured or don't have a doctor or a prescription, and I've always put in my Vertical Diet ebook links to whomever could provide, either it's Craigslist or I have a supplier that refurbishes machines that ship them out to my clients if need be, and because the alternative is not to get treated. And I think it's
weird. You need a prescription for a sleep apnea machine for some weird reason.
Yeah, well, even to get a mask in some states, you can't go buy a mask, and you find out. In Las Vegas, I was able to buy a mask at a medical supply store, and then I guess the medical supply people lobby the government to make that medical prescription only, and all of a sudden the mask is 3 times the price. Jeez. And you can't order it yourself anymore. So it's a frustrating, the cost associated with navigating the medical system, but I think it's important enough.
It's extremely important. Like bad sleep is horrible.
I've said before that it's life-changing, and I've been in this business a long time. We all have. And we don't say that about a lot of things. We tend to have gotten excited and then not so excited about things as they've come and gone. But getting a CPAP for somebody who has a significant enough level of apnea, remember, it's not an on-off switch. It exists on a spectrum, the degree of apnea that you have, the amount of time you spend holding your breath. It's life-changing. I remember in the early 90s, my weight started getting up to 220, 230, 240. I started having worse and worse problems with my sleep. And I would drive to almost fall asleep driving to work in the morning after a night of sleep. I was exhausted all day. I would sit at my desk and I would stare at the couch that was in my office. And all I wanted to do was go crash. But I wouldn't, because I would wake up even more tired. Because when I was awake and moving around, at least I was getting the oxygen. And then when I'd go to sleep, I would just sit there and hold my breath, and I'd wake up just absolutely crushed. And so I finally got a CPAP. Now back then, they were actually CPAPs. Continuous positive air. And so it's like driving down the freeway with no windshield. It's just all night long, and you wake up in the morning and you're like, argh. And now we've got BiPAPs that when you exhale, they stop forcing air in. They're very comfortable to utilize, and there are adjustments that you can make to the machine to help with comfort level for your breathing. And then I just recently, and I need to post a video on this, for the longest time, every time Eddie Cohen and I'd get together at a seminar or at one of the Olympias or an expo, we would always look at each other and point out the lines from the straps that strap to your face. You always have these indentations in your cheek and your head. And the mask can be kind of uncomfortable because if you start losing air through seeping around the edges, you just Velcro and you strap that down harder.
Yeah.
And then it pushes on your bones of your face, and you start getting, waking up with some soreness just from that. So I got this new mask. I was just Googling CPAP mask, no headgear, no strap, and up comes this one called PAP, TAP, and it uses a mouthpiece. Those bite guards that you boil in water, and you bite on them. Well, this has just an upper. And so you boil it in water and you snap it to your upper teeth, and attached to that is a nostril mask that has a hose that you plug into your machine.
Is it any of these?
There's nothing on your face. PAP, TAP, PAP. And that's that one in the middle right there. That one right there. And that's it. There's no straps that go around your head.
The mouthpiece.
The mouthpiece snaps into your upper teeth.
Yeah, so it creates like a suction, right?
It just holds it there.
Right.
Because it snaps in.
Right.
And then it has a little adjustment that allows you to, there's a little screw on the side that he's working right now.
Yeah.
And it allows you to, there it is. And it sits perfectly.
It's amazing.
Sits perfectly. You don't have any, now you might have to use a little tape if your mouth opens up, but other than that, no more of those masks or those straps around the head. I've been using
That's
that one.
That's the most comfortable one you've had so far.
I've used a lot of them. I've had CPAP since the early 90s. And I've used a lot of different masks over the years trying to resolve different problems.
That's pretty cool.
Especially with facial hair, because that affects the mask's ability.
Have you tried to sleep
leaking.
with just mouth tape on?
I tried that. I tried just mouth tape. I even went in and tried to get one of those dental fixtures to bring the jaw forward, but I started having problems with my bite, and I think that's one of the big problems. It changes your bite, so your teeth don't match up anymore. So I've tried a lot of things. I had a surgery on my throat and had my uvula lasered off. It was the most uncomfortable thing.
The little punching bag thing?
Yes. They go in there with a laser and laser it off.
Do you have to keep it at least? Like in a little thing?
No, I mean, it's all burned up. I went in and had stents. This is when I'm 280, 290. I was like, I'm sitting here trying to find this little patchwork to fix a problem that was obviously caused by myself.
Do you think if you had that when you were 280, 290, that would have solved the problem?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that solves the problem at any weight, if you have apnea. Now, I should say, if you don't have apnea, don't wear CPAP. It's not going to give you improved performance. That's not what it's about.
I think we should also point out that you do and you have done a lot of other types of exercise other than just lifting. So people that are listening, it's not like you haven't used an exercise bike before. It's not like you haven't done sprints. It's not like you haven't done other activity other than just lift. Because I think that people think they can like exercise their way out of some of these things. And I don't know how much you can.
I take a lot of abuse because I do an interview and I said I don't really prescribe a lot of cardio for my clients because I don't think it's terribly effective for weight loss as far as energy expenditure goes. And we have plenty of research on this called the constrained energy model by Herman Ponzer. But I do cardio. I have 3 10-minute walks a day. Is 210 minutes a week of exercise. The American Heart Association recommends 150. So at a minimum, you take my recommendations, you well exceed the current health recommendations for exercise. But then I have more than that. Plus we train. And I know Stu Phillips just recently wrote an article and pointed to the American Heart Association stating that weightlifting is equivalent to a replacement for cardio for long-term disease risk. Now, both together is better than one or the other, but one and the other compared to each other are equivocal. So weightlifting provides certainly some health benefits as well. I have both. I have the 3 10-minute walks, likely 4. If you're eating 4 meals a day, I like to see 4 10-minute walks. And then we do some HIIT training, at least a couple times a week, a brief, this isn't a Tabata. It's on leg day, warming up with the assault bike. And our training, especially when it's bodybuilding training, is of sufficient volume and effort that you get a pretty demanding effect for cardiovascular fitness. And I know if you're going to, if you're going to break it down into the minutia, that the length, the duration of that cardio does matter ultimately for VO2 max. So you'd want to see something 20, 30 minutes extended. But again, the meds mentioned earlier, another study came out to suggest that doesn't improve performance or recovery from training, which we thought it would contribute to. But it's still good for health. The bottom line is exercise is great for health. But for many reasons, I don't ask my weight loss clients to do, an extraordinary amount of extra cardio, thinking they're going to, through the energy expenditure side of the equation, burn a ton of fat. 99% of the fat loss is going to come from maintaining a calorie restriction. The exercise is great for health. Additional exercises has either a compensatory effect or significantly diminished returns in two different areas. One, whatever exercise you implement is going to burn fewer calories as you adapt to it. Yeah. You do 30 minutes of cardio on a treadmill and say, presumably day one, you burn 300 calories. 30 minutes later, you're burning 140 calories with the same 30 minutes of exercise, the same duration and speed. Now, could you increase duration and speed? Sure, but where does that end? And the other compensatory effect is that people tend, when they do a lot of extra exercise, they tend to sit more and eat more. So now they're down-regulating their non-exercise activity, and they're blowing out their diet just because they're tired and hungry. And so I'm cautious about how much and the intensity of extra cardio because I think its return is minimal, if not potentially at the sacrifice of the calorie deficit you're trying to maintain.
I think some of the healthiest people in the world don't even really think about it. I don't think they think about any of the stuff we talked about today.
No, and
when you go to like Norway or Sweden, you go to these other places and other countries, they have different cultures and everything's different there. But it is interesting. They just, walking is part of their day. There happens to be a lot of hills. There's a lot of mountains. There's just baked into their day.
And ultra-processed, hyper-palatable, calorie-dense foods are less available, which is a huge one. There is, as I think we've talked about before, there is a genetic component to obesity, a hormonal component with appetite dysregulation, where ghrelin and leptin resistance that causes people who suffer from obesity to not get hungry as fast and to be hungry again sooner and to just be compelled to eat to a greater degree than somebody who might be able to more easily maintain their weight. They just don't have as much of that drive. And if we always think that, when we would get ready for a bodybuilding show, as you recall, you get super hungry and you're just dreaming about food and thinking about food around the clock all the time.
Yeah, literally you'll have a dream about food.
100%.
And you'll be like, I messed up on my diet. Like, whoops.
Yep. And
you wake up terrified.
You don't have to be 8, 7, 6% body fat to experience that. Mm-hmm. Any weight loss, somebody at 40% body fat who diets down to 38% body fat is still overweight, potentially obese, has the same hunger signaling as somebody who diets from 12% body fat to 8% body fat. And so you're thinking and dreaming about food all the time. So are they. It's the same problem. And so it's not, just a matter of how lean you get, but it's any weight loss can differentially for different people based on their genetic predisposition for hunger signaling, be affected by that, and their whole body fights their effort by making them more tired, decreasing their thyroid, testosterone, interfering with their sleep, which makes you insulin resistant, and then making you hungry all the time and hard to satisfy that hunger. So, and we know that even more than ever because now we have the GLP-1 agonists, the semaglutide and the rest that show us that appetite seems to be the primary driver. Those medications are incredibly successful at taking 15, 20, 25% body weight reductions just simply from suppressing hunger.
Let me ask this, Stan. Like you've gotten up to 300 something pounds, or maybe 290. I don't know what your heaviest was, but have you always had a high appetite drive, but just made good food decisions? And has your appetite changed at all?
No, I always had to eat a lot of food to try and gain weight, which is always hard to do. I know people think, I wish I could be you, but consistently eating 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day is a chore.
It's disgusting.
It's hard work. Yeah. and then trying to eat 5,000 or 6,000 calories of food that doesn't make your health worse. And that's just lower saturated fats and simple sugars. You just try and stay with healthier foods if you can. That's hard. But I always have been hungry a lot, but I've eaten, I think I used to dirty bulk back in the early 90s and got fat. I would eat ice cream, and I would have ice cream protein shakes, and I would put extra cheese on one of those Totino's pizzas at night before bed. And I would wake up. I mean, I had this whole plan for it's just, pizza, pasta, pancakes, and bacon double cheeseburgers. And I did everything I could just to get an enormous amount of calories and gain as much weight as I could, which now we know that severity of your calorie surplus isn't going to help with muscle gain, but it certainly increases fat gain. So later in my career, I about the only thing I would do the last month before a powerlifting meet is I would throw in some extra calories, maybe with a pint of ice cream at night. It would be like 800 extra calories or something, just to keep that extra weight on, because I believe that mass moves mass, and I see the fullness effect occur in powerlifters, where you can get that extra bit of bench press. Might not help the deadlift, but with squat and bench, certainly a little bit extra water retention. D-ball didn't hurt with that. You get that extra 5 pounds of water retention.
You want that bloat.
You kind of want the bloat, So we did everything we could to stay bloated.
Y'all are wild.
And it was all about the bloat,
The bloat.
It was.
Oh my God.
It was so powerful. You almost felt like you were a geared lifter.
The redder you are, the better you are.
100%. Almost felt like you were in a lifting suit when you went down, and your body was just like that.
Yeah, you could feel almost like your blood pressure being high, and it made you feel strong, which I don't know what the correlation between the two is.
Yeah, well, it's water.
You're going to explode.
Yeah.
So,
that stretch reflex. It happens quicker when you're
everything's all
blown
packed in
out
like a sausage.
That. Yeah. So one of the things I found as I've been losing weight is that I'm hungry all the time. Mm-hmm. But I can eat pretty much as I want because of the foods that I do eat.
Yeah.
Because I don't eat pizza and cookies and stuff like that. And so I get pretty satiated on, a lot of top sirloin steak and chicken, egg white blends, and yogurts, berries. But I'm hungry every few hours. I need to get something. And I know that gets the keto folks all riled up, and they want me to go low carb so I won't be as hungry. But for performance, I want the carbohydrates.
Gotcha.
So my training sessions are better. My recovery from training is better. And we do see that in terms of the way that carbohydrates affect some of those metabolite accumulations that we were talking about earlier in the muscle. We do see we've found out that there's no anabolic window for protein intake. You don't need to eat protein immediately following a workout. That's more like a garage door. A few hours before, a few hours after, you're fine. And total protein for the day matters more than anything, really. But with carbohydrates, we discovered that carbohydrates before workouts, and this is my co-author of The Vertical Diet, Dr. Damon McCune, who's a PhD RDN, was director of dietetics at UNLV. He did his PhD research on carbs pre-workout. And so we compared people who consumed carbohydrates with a drink to people who just swished the drink around in their mouth and spit it out. They had equivalent training results. Okay. But these weren't carb depleted people. Is one thing that's important about that. But apparently, it's more of a psychological impact that your brain feels. Your ability to contract muscle fibers has to do with your perceived level of exertion.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's independent necessarily of mechanically. It has a lot to do with the brain sending the signal. And if the brain feels depleted, hungry, stressed, that all is going to affect your workout. Mm-hmm. And that's another reason why, like, icing the day before a soccer game or a football game when you're sore helps. That does help because it disconnects the pain from the brain, and so your body you don't have this inhibitory signaling, and so you can go out and perform at a high level. So all of those things factor into eating, your workout performance. But we do see that carbs immediately post-workout helps decrease DOMs and decrease the level of fatigue that your muscles experience. And so that's a good time to take them, particularly if you're training twice a day. Then it's hugely important not only to get the carbs, but to get the salt and water in, so that you're completely, you get some glycogen, but some sodium and water back in. So your evening workout is much better. So that's when the timing becomes important. Your
diet doesn't seem very restrictive. I realize for someone that's on the standard American diet. Maybe they eat fast food quite a bit, and
Yeah.
maybe they don't eat great. But with your diet, I think that most people that select diets, or most people that try to choose a particular diet, they would find that your diet has a lot of variety to it.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Peter Attia I've always said that there's many paths to the same destination, and that all diets work, and they all work for the same reason. They create a calorie deficit. But Peter kind of summarized, and he was able to put them into one of three categories: CR, DR, and TR. CR being calorie restriction, weigh and measure your food, read labels, make sure you're in a calorie deficit. DR is dietary restriction. That's take something out. That's your carnivore, keto, vegan, paleo. You just eliminate something. Eliminate carbs, eliminate things that cavemen didn't eat, eliminate meats, right? And then TR is time restriction. Don't need to say much about that. Alternate day or 16-8, doesn't matter. Skip breakfast. So those are the three categories. All diets fit into one of those three categories, or maybe a combination of two.
And also, why not use all those?
Yeah. Some people do dietary restriction and time restriction.
Right.
But they all work for the same reason. But none of them are any better than the other. And there's been thousands of studies now showing that it's very individualistic, and you find the one that feels the least restrictive to you, that you're not just too hungry, which is why, again, semaglutide GLP-1 agonists work so well. They just don't make you hungry, irrespective of what diet you're on, is you're not just compelled to overeat. And so that's important. The vertical diet originally was because I had seen since the late 80s, I was a personal trainer in college. I was a soccer coach. I worked at box gyms. I trained athletes at the University of Oregon, the track and football team. I've been involved in athletes and nutrition and competitive bodybuilding figures physique bikini for 30 years. I saw that restriction was the name of the game. I saw that the guru diets were typically somebody would come show me their diet. I just had a woman Saturday at the seminar show me her diet. And I was just like, it was the old guru diet. You know, it was egg whites, tilapia, broccoli, a scoop of almond butter. You know, it was that kind of thing.
Makes me tired already.
She had demonized, the trainer had obviously demonized red meat, fruit, dairy, the egg yolk, salt. So I did my Iceland seminar. It's been almost 8 years ago. It's got nearly 7 million views. And I spent 2 hours talking about every aspect of the diet. I did a side-by-side comparison. Guru diet, vertical diet. More inclusive, obviously better in terms of dietary adherence, but also in terms of the micronutrient importance. Omega-3s from salmon, iron and B vitamins from red meat, choline and biotin from egg yolks, calcium from dairy. And now Stu Phillips just did a big report on the fact that dairy has a independent effect on BMI and performance. It's a dairy effect. He was specific to say that. It wasn't a protein effect, it wasn't a calcium effect, it wasn't a calorie effect. It was a dairy effect. And for those people who can consume dairy, some people have allergies, some people have intolerances that determine the amount that they can consume, which can be helped along with things like Greek yogurt or cheese being lower in lactose, as well as Fairlife, etc. I want that in every woman's diet because I need 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day. And it doesn't just help with bone health, it helps with blood pressure. The DASH diet, which everybody thinks is a low sodium diet, the DASH diet always had and still has, and the primary driver, I believe, of the blood pressure resolution is the fact that they raise potassium up to 4,700 milligrams, calcium up to 1,000 milligrams, and magnesium up to 400 milligrams. When you get those things into the diet, then you have then the sodium becomes less important. But it's a huge contributor to resolving low blood pressure. So yes, it was intended to be more inclusive. But then I introduced leaning into the low FODMAP diet, which is somewhat restrictive. Certainly, the vertical diet's much more inclusive than the guru diet, but that is a type of restriction, the FODMAP diet. And that is because at the time I was doing those seminars, I was talking to an audience of competitive bodybuilding, figure physique, bikini, and strongmen, powerlifters. So both ends of the spectrum, over restriction, dirty bulking. Those people tend more than the general audience to suffer from significant digestive distress. We know chronic calorie restriction itself drives a significant amount of digestive problems, as well as IBS. And we know that, the dirty bulking, eating pizza, pasta, pancakes all day long and is going to cause a lot of digestive problems. So I suggested that based on Monash University's research out of Australia and a long history of research on IBS and Crohn's. There's some evidence to say that the FODMAP diet helps with Crohn's as well. That they start to eat lower gas vegetables, the fermentable oligodisaccharides and polyols.
All right, Mark, you're getting leaner and leaner, but you always enjoy the food you're eating. So how you doing it?
I got a secret, man. It's called Good Life Protein.
Okay, tell me about that.
I've been doing some Good Life Protein. You know, we've been talking on the show for a really long time of certified Piedmontese beef, and you can get that under the umbrella of Good Life Proteins, which also has chicken breast, chicken thighs, sausage, shrimp, scallops, all kinds of different fish, salmon, tilapia. The website has nearly any kind of meat that you can think of. Lamb is another one that comes to mind. And so I've been utilizing and kind of using some different strategy, kind of depending on the way that I'm eating. So if I'm doing a keto diet, I'll eat more fat, and that's where I might get the sausage, and I might get their 80-20 grass-fed, grass-finished ground beef. I might get bacon. And there's other days where I kind of do a little bit more bodybuilder style, where the fat is, might be like 40 grams or something like that. And then I'll have some of the leaner cuts of the certified Piedmontese beef.
This is one of the reasons why neither of us find it hard to stay in shape, because we're always enjoying the food we're eating. And protein, you talk about protein, leverage it all the time. It's satiating and helps you feel full.
I look forward to every meal. And I can surf and turf,
Yeah.
I could cook up some, chicken thighs or something like that and have some shrimp with it, or I could have some steak. I would say, the steak, it keeps going back and forth for me on my favorites. So it's hard for me to lock one down, but I really love the bavette steaks.
Yeah.
And then I also love the ribeyes as well.
You can't go wrong with the ribeyes. So guys, if you guys want to get your hands on some really good meat, you can head to goodlifeproteins.com and use code POWER for 20% off any purchases made on the website, or you can use code POWERPROJECT to get an extra 5% off if you subscribe and save to any meats that are a recurring purchase.
This is the best meat in the world.
And that some foods depend on how they're prepared or the quantity that you eat of particular foods. Garlic, onions, potentially broccoli in massive amounts can cause digestive distress or potentially flare up an IBS episode. And we see that around 40 to 70% of people who implement the IBS low FODMAP diet see a relief of their symptoms. So working with an audience who commonly has those problems, I had them lean into that. Now, that's not a permanent prescription. It can also help you determine maybe just a few of the items that are high FODMAP that you want to pull out that you've consistently noticed make you bloat. But that's the only caveat, and it's for specific circumstances. It's intended to be to resolve digestive distress and then reintroduce over time. Paul Saladino had some of the same issues. We went on his podcast years ago, and I talked to him about the same thing with fruit and dairy. And sure enough, now he eats fruits and yogurt. Then just hugely beneficial in terms of your micronutrients. I remember sending him a DM 5 years ago and said, "What are you doing for calcium?" He's like, "Well, there's, what do you say? There was bone marrow." I'm like, "Are you eating 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day from bone marrow?" It's ghost. And I'm like, "You should consider dairy." And so he said, "You should come down to my podcast. We'll talk about it." And so we did. And sure enough, ultimately, he included those things. It's not to suggest that carnivore diet can't benefit people based on the CRDR-TR, weight loss being the primary driver of helping people with their, is it 99% of health benefits are improved simply from weight loss itself, irrespective of diet. But some people have, even the Sonnenberg trials on fiber introduction showed that a third of the population suffered poorly, a third benefited, a third had no change. Mm-hmm. And so some people are adversely affected based on their current level of health by certain, if not all, vegetables, who knows? And so when they eliminate them, they feel better. But the goal would be to reintroduce over time. Interestingly enough, that same trial at Stanford used fermented foods we may have talked about previously, and 100% of the participants had improved gut microbiome diversity and density from eating yogurt, kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut, those kinds of things. So,
the vertical diet is something that is always evolving, right? You're always adding to it.
I'm trying to stay current with the science. When I met Dr. Damon McCune some 5 years ago, we sat down, we spent hundreds of hours together. We trained together, we lived together in Vegas for years, and tried to make sure that the recommendations I made were scientifically accurate, and tried to provide more nuance to some of the recommendations that I was making. And so we have made some revisions, but it's the foundation's pretty similar in terms of macros. Calories are king. Macros, protein being the primary important one there. And then the diverse micronutrient profile, the foundation being from high potassium fruits and vegetables. And then tips on both ends for satiety for weight loss and for appetite for weight gain. Because I was on both ends of that spectrum throughout my career, and I work with clients on both ends. So most of that's the same. If I had to say something significantly changed in there, it would be what the evidence shows in terms of seed oils over the years. I can't eat them. I did a video called The Real Poison That's Killing Us, using associative data of seed oil consumption with obesity epidemic. And they're, they overlay, but it's associative, not causal. And I talked about the fact that I was allergic to them. So I said they are a poison to me. I'm biased. It's in my video. And then I think it was that I had asked Tucker Goodrich to come on with Alan Flanagan to debate that out, because I thought they were both the most knowledgeable people on both sides of that topic. And it was a 2.5 hour debate. And at the conclusion of that, I just felt like that Alan had the more compelling scientific basis behind that, and that was some 4+ years ago now. And since then, we just have an enormous amount of research suggesting that we can't identify seed oils as being inflammatory. Matter of fact, probably just the opposite. Or in the absence of their association with ultra-processed food, which is how 70% of them are consumed. So I'm not dismissing the fact that the foods that they're in tend to be things you should avoid, or the deep-fried foods. We do see in repeatedly reheated oils inflammatory markers and increased cancer incidence. So it's that process and that's where a lot of them are consumed. Yeah, fries, chicken wings, etc. The deep fat fryers, and I spoke about that in the video as well. But I'm not, if somebody consumes seed oils, I'm not in the position to say, based on the evidence, that that's causing obesity in the absence of the foods they're associated with, or that they're inflammatory. And so I made those revisions in our book that came out some 3 years ago now, The Vertical Diet, that was on Amazon and is in Barnes & Noble. You'll notice that those revisions have been made, and I said just exactly what we've just discussed here now, that I also wouldn't take anything out of my diet and replace it with a seed oil. That's very important, because my diet's all whole foods, ultra-processed. I wouldn't take a fat out, and this is what the Guru Diet does. The Guru Diet takes the egg yolk out and puts peanut butter in. That's going backwards, okay? Yeah. I wouldn't take the egg yolk out and put canola oil in. And I don't have a high saturated fat diet to begin with. If I said I keep my fats below 30%, and I keep my saturated fats below 10% by using top sirloin steak, which is very lean. I remember Tanner, he actually come out and shot a video with me and trained in Vegas, but he's a big proponent of red meat. But he was concerned that he was eating the vertical diet and his LDL was elevated. And he said, but I'm eating red meat. And I said, well, you can eat 100% of your daily protein, which you wouldn't, but you could with top sirloin steak, 200 grams a day of protein from top sirloin steak. And you would have less than 4% of your total calories come from saturated fat. So there are lean meats that fit within that American Heart Association recommendation. I wouldn't eat 100% of my diet from red meat. I have a diverse number of foods in there, with obviously with yogurt and salmon and egg white blends. But the point being is I've always kept saturated fats under 10%, so that didn't change. Yeah. So the key things, calories, macronutrients, micronutrients, and some of the specific foods, as discussed, are pretty much the same that I felt back in the early 90s as I did when I wrote the diet 10 years ago, and as I do today with some minor changes. I tuned up the sodium recommendations and made sure that I distinguished between, which was also in my video, hypertensive people versus active athletes, and the need for their salt intake. So people don't think that it's a panacea.
Why did you move?
Oh, my goodness. I tell you, I met my wife 24 years ago in Seattle, and she was born and raised in American Samoa. I don't know if I told this story before on your show, but she applied for a job at my business. And I was like, she came in, she had this long flowered, Polynesian dress on.
Look at his eyes lighting up.
Yeah. Curly hair all the way down to her butt. Flower in her ear,
Oh, man.
Absolutely beautiful.
You're
island
done.
girl.
Toast.
She walks in and I'm like, you're hired. Can't type, no experience. Come on in.
I don't have HR.
Yeah. So of course now I'd be like the hashtag Me Too guy, you know, but this was 24 years ago. So it was perfectly. About a year after that, we started dating. We've been together ever since, but, we visited the island periodically over the years. You guys know I've been back to do seminars there and just really always loved it there. Go back and visit her family. They grew up, the island's broken up into villages. It's still very traditional. They don't have a lot of tourism there. Probably only, you know, it's 2-story building is the tallest on the island pretty much, I think. Speed limit is 25 miles an hour. That's a beautiful volcanic island in the South Pacific Ocean, about 5 hours off the coast of New Zealand.
Is the speed limit really 25 miles an hour?
It really is 25 miles an hour throughout the whole island. I have a golf cart. I drive my little golf cart on the island. That's what I do. There I am.
Everybody kind of know each other, kind of deal?
Everybody knows each other or is somewhat related, a distant cousin or whatever. It's a great community of very traditional people who are still steeped in tradition and values and very kid oriented. I have a 10 and well, now 11 and 13-year-old. And we went to visit Christmas before last and just had a great time. We went snorkeling, played golf, went swimming. Just had a fantastic one hiking out on the Manua Island, or Anu'u Island. It's just beautiful. It's like Honolulu without the tourism. It's a volcanic island. It's probably, if it were a rectangle, it'd be 4 miles by 18 miles. It's the size of the island. Most of the people live along the shoreline, of course, and the mountains just go all right up and touch the sky with all the greenery and stuff that's in there. But my wife asked me if we would move, if I would ever be interested in moving there, because we had this fantastic vacation over Christmas time. Well, as it turns out, they had indoor pickleball. And they had a pickleball association of American Samoa with about 100 members. And I spent every day of the 2 weeks, like if we were going to go hiking or we were going to go fishing or if we were going to go snorkeling, I always made sure I was back in time so I could play pickleball. And there's such a fantastic group of people down there. The people that I've met that play pickleball are amazing. They're from all different socioeconomic groups and age levels and men and women both. And you got 65-year-old former tennis player ladies just kicking my ass, and I'm just like, fuck. And it's just a great group of people, but I've just enjoyed, playing all this time. But when she asked if I would move back there, I'm like, sure, I'll go back. I didn't mention that they had indoor pickleball. It was the most compelling reason that I would go back there. So we went, this is Sunset Park in Vegas. Yeah. This is one guy that I took coaching lessons from. He's a real good player down there. But we sold the house and we moved down there about 9 months ago, last summer. And the kids are in a school there, and they love it. And I'm able to take them to school in the morning in my golf cart and pick them up in the afternoon. And in between that time, I'm usually swimming, or I had some sea-doos sent down. I ride on the lagoon there's an ocean break, and there's a huge lagoon right up against the mountains. It's phenomenal. Play some golf.
Any kava bars over there?
Any what?
Kava bars?
I'm not familiar with those. On the island, I mentioned that there's all
in
these
Fiji. I know they have a lot of kava. The kava is just like a relaxing, herb that people drink.
There's no marijuana on the island. There's no guns on the island. It's extremely safe. Kids can go anywhere they want, whenever they want. There's generations of family and relatives that all play parents, and it takes a village to raise a kid. So one of the huge benefits there is that in Vegas, I wouldn't let my kids out of my sight, and in Samoa, they can walk to the grocery store, they can go to the park. All the kids are doing it, and it's just a community of kids. But it's really been fantastic for us, and we'll be there at least till our kids graduate from high school and go off to college. So it's another 7 years that we intend to stay there, and we've settled in nicely. The the island is broken up into villages, I mentioned, and within the villages you've got communal land that the families have grown up on. This was the land that my wife grew up on, is where we're currently staying, where she grew up, and it had. There's multiple homes on this communal land that's a shared space, and most of them have gardens, pretty big gardens. The island is lush with food. I mean, with all the rain and the sun that comes down there, it's just food growing around you. We have avocado tree right in front of the house. It just drops avocados on the ground. We have papaya and mango. There's pineapple and coconuts. There's taro root and carrots and bananas and a lot of the Chinese folks that come to the island, they'll do most of the gardening and harvesting, and then all along the roadway, you'll see about every 100 feet, there's a stand, a fruit and vegetable stand, just loaded with all this. You just pull over every single day and grab all the fruits and vegetables that you want, and usually about every 200 feet, there's a big half barrel with a grill top on it of chicken being barbecued and the smoke wafting into the roadways. You're just smelling teriyaki chicken as you go. So it's just a fantastic environment. So I feel like I'm on a permanent vacation. It took me months to just calm down and not feel like there was something that I needed to do. I have to be somewhere. And, you're just calm. You're calm when you're driving. You're not running around like in Vegas. You're like, yeah, fuck yeah, you honk. Down there, when you honk, it's to tell somebody thank you. It's a completely different environment. It's the most peaceful, kindest people. They always come up to me. They're like, "Oh, muscle." Yeah, the kids, the adults, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
and they're perfectly comfortable and everybody's family. And
so they don't care if you're late and stuff like that, right?
No, the kids will come to school late sometimes, and I'm like, "Do you need a note?" Oh no, it doesn't matter. You don't have there's no schedule. You don't really look at a watch or a calendar. It's just And if I'm like, my wife says, "Oh, dinner's at 5." So at 4:50, of course, I'm standing there tapping my foot with my keys, and I'm like, we gotta go. It's 10 minutes away. And she's like, no. She goes, nobody's showing up till 6.
Yeah.
We get there at 5:30 and we're like the first people there. And I'm looking around, I'm like, this is going to be a dead event. At 6 o'clock or so, it's packed. Yeah, that's the island. Uh-huh. It's a beautiful place, beautiful people. We did a video that you hosted for me. Was the fattest people in the world video. Is that what I think the title was? Yep. Where I talked a little bit about how my wife grew up on the island with no running water and a hole in the ground for an outhouse. And I told the story about how they had a pipe from the stream for a shower. I didn't realize that was for the whole village.
Wow.
That wasn't just their pipe. They had one pipe from the stream for a shower that all the families used and took turns. So it was quite primitive. They slept on reed mats on a dirt ground, and they had a 4-post hut with a grass thatch roof and blankets hanging down for walls. Mm-hmm. No windows, no TV, of course, no electronics. It was quite a primitive upbringing. They would raise pigs and goats and all of the fruits and vegetables and everything they could harvest from the sea, and they would take it to the marketplace and barter, and then ultimately...
Cool environment for your children to grow up.
Oh, it's fantastic. They've acclimated so well. And of course they have the relatives. My wife has 11 brothers and sisters, and they all have kids. And so it's just family everywhere we go. Well, then food stamps were introduced to the island, and people stopped growing all their own food. And of course, now, as I mentioned, the Chinese usually harvest and sell it now. And so, they have a surplus of whatever's affordable to bring to the island, which is usually a store full of the foundational cheapest foods are seed oils, white flour, and sugar. And that's the base of most of their dishes, unfortunately. So they do have they suffer from a pretty significant amount of obesity on the island as a result of the cheap ultra-processed foods and overconsumption of those.
Where can people find you? Where can they get the vertical diet?
Stan Efferding. Everything's at stanefferding.com is my website. I've got my vertical diet meal prep. I send Monster Mash to doorways all throughout the country.
Monster Mash, greatest invention of all time, by the way.
And 50 other meals. They're all in there. That's the vertical diet. And then, of course, the vertical diet ebook is now in the 4.0 version. Anybody who bought a previous version gets the new versions for free. And if you want the new version, it's now over 250 pages, 200 references to videos, articles, and peer-reviewed research supporting everything we talked about today and more. And then Stan Efferding is also the YouTube, and Stan Efferding is the Instagram.
Monster Mash. I'm just thinking about it right now. It's so good.
I'm going to Costco.
Strength is never weakness. Weakness never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.